Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 39 of Deep in the Novo. I'm your host, Ryan Novozinsky, joined here, as always, by my co-host, Sudeep Tumma. And this is the last one, Sudeep. This is the last one of this OSU football season campaign where the OSU Cowboys ended up finishing 8-3 on the season with a Cheez-It Bowl victory over Miami. And man, what a game that was. And it was a great parallel into the whole season holistically and how it went. And, you know, how there were some ups and downs here and there. There were some injury issues here and there. But in the end, I guess, you know, going out on top is never a bad thing for any given team out there in the country, whether it's the Cheez-It Bowl, whether it's the last regular season game, whether it's any game. Obviously, you play to win the game, unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles in the last week of the football season. But I digress. Let's talk about how this season went. Okay, let's digest things a little bit, but you can't digest this season without starting primarily with the play of this offensive line, and specifically the adaptability of their great coach Charlie Dickey.
Man, it was such a luxury. It's really seasons like this where you see the value of a offensive line coach like Charlie Dickey. I mean, one of the best in the country. I mean, think about it. You lose 5 guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
From Dylan Galloway to Bryce Bray to Jacob Farrell down the line. I mean, the first game of the season, you lose 2 more guys. Suddenly you're down 5, and you just blinked, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, coming to season, we talked about it. There wasn't much of – we weren't too concerned with this offensive line. Like, yeah, you lost a couple guys, but you have such an excellent offensive line coach. And, I mean, how many times have we talked about it in the show, in context, in person? Having – an offensive line coach is, you know, the most important key to, I mean, one of the most important keys to having a strong offensive line, because it's not just about how big your guys are, just how nasty they are, how strong they are, they're whatever measurables. There's more to it. Obviously, that's a part of it, but you talk about continuity, communication, understanding chemistry, pointing out your matchups, pointing out where the blitz is coming from, having a smart center, working together. Communication is so key. Every time you see a free runner from any team ever in pass rush, it's because of bad communication on the offensive line.
Sure.
I mean, almost all the time, unless you have, obviously you're throwing 8 guys and you bring a 9th guy or something like that. But in general, that's what it comes down to. And Charlie Dickey, his value is not only with developing guys who should be second string, third string, in many cases, walk-ons, guys who probably shouldn't have even, you know, been in that backup spot. But instead, they're starting from day 1 or day 2 even, right? And for Charlie Dickey to get those guys ready, get them in a position, and then also just to keep the continuity week to week and keep these guys fresh and have them work together and get better, it just shows the value of having a guy like this. But, I mean, you talk about, it wasn't quite the season that this team was expecting. Because, I mean, think about it. The 2011 hype. You talk about this season's hype. It all circled back to that, right? 2011. Why were there 2011 expectations? Chuba Hubbard and Tylan Wallace were coming back, right? Obviously, there are other things like Spencer coming and taking another step forward. This defense. I mean, nobody thought this defense would be this good, which we'll get to, but
Certainly.
But it really started there. But with those skill position guys, it wasn't. You can't just have these, you know, strong skill position. You can't just have great receivers and great running backs, even great quarterback for that matter, and win games. Offensive line is so important. I mean, I've seen so many teams that have an okay quarterback or a smart quarterback, or just a game manager, and then okay wide receivers, a good running back, and an amazing offensive line, and suddenly they're one of the best offenses in the NFL. And it helps their defense too, and that's the main thing. Because when you're able to run the ball, you know, kill time possession, keep the ball in your hands, you're keeping the defense off the field, and it's making them in turn better. It's churning out those possessions and keeping the other team on the sideline. And it helps so much, and that's where the offensive line is so important. And you circle back to this season and wonder, you know, where did all the struggles come from for this team? It all started in the trenches with that offensive line.
Yeah, so many times you and I have discussed off air, on air, wherever, how valuable these skill positions were this year. And that is diminished by the play of the offensive line. But the offensive line, we should say also, it got progressively so much better, more consistent, I'd say, right? They started to be able to roll with the punches, roll with the guys that they had out there, despite not being at 100%. Hell, the best game that they had all season long was Texas Tech, which I believe it was days before this, maybe even like very, very short amount of time before this, Tevin Jenkins announced that he was done for the season.
Yeah.
Before that Texas Tech game. they go out and have their best performance. Are you kidding me? That's a testament to Charlie Dickey. That's a testament to what he's able to do with this unit, with establishing great communication, establishing all the other things that you need to establish as an offensive line coach. And he was able to do it all season long, and that's why he is one of the most valuable coaches, I think, in the country as it stands right now.
You're right. I mean, Tevin Jenkins goes out. That's one of the best offensive linemen in the country. I mean, obviously one of the best on this team, but the best on this team by far, but obviously one of the best in the country as well. He goes out, and suddenly, you're bringing in backups and guys that shouldn't be playing there. You're rotating guys around. A guy in Josh Sills who's obviously struggled at left tackle, but again, it's hard. People think, okay, all offensive linemen can play every position, but going from left guard to left tackle is difficult. Going from left guard to right tackle, it's even more difficult.
Absolutely.
And this guy does it with precision. They bring guys in. Preston Wilson. I mean, you think about the type of work they've done. And Mike Gundy talked about when that game came about, the reason they were able to have such a strong performance was all 5 guys played, right? All 5 guys, for the first time this season, came together and were able to practice all in one season. I guess that really hadn't happened. And, I'm not surprised. You think about how many injuries this team has sustained, how many injuries they sustained to this offensive line. It's difficult when you're not practicing together. Chemistry on the field is important, but it starts in practice. You have a million more reps in practice than you do on the field, right? You're playing for 60 minutes. You're practicing hours a day, every day, and you don't get those reps. You don't get continuity. And you talk about communication. A lot of that is continuity, right? Playing together week to week, understanding each other, communicating. That seamless type of transition. You don't have that. And that was a game, Texas Tech, where everything really, you saw this offensive line at full force when they were able to road grade in the run blocking, where they were able to create holes. When they were giving Spencer Sanders time. It was a different team. It was a team that this is supposed to be.
Yeah, totally. This is the type of team that you saw it come into fruition all throughout in some of those latter half of the season games. And it makes it frustrating if you're an OSU fan to not see that all consistently throughout the entire season. But it definitely permeates throughout the entire team. And let's talk specifically about the quarterback position and what impact it might have had on them. Because remember that Tulsa game? Nobody, even Spencer Sanders, obviously played 3 plays or something like that.
Sure.
Even there, you saw it. Even when the offensive line was at, I guess, you can't even call any sort of unit of this offensive line this year full strength, but even at its peak, I guess, health, they weren't able to create these ample opportunities for Spencer Sanders, and it really affected him. Obviously, one of the reasons that he became injured. What did you see and how the offensive line impacted the quarterback position this year?
That's where you really start. We how many times have we said it right off air? The team with the issue with this team. It's not a skill position thing. The skill position was never a problem. Even when you lost Tylan Wallace, it wasn't that big a problem. It sucks losing Tylan Wallace. Let's not cream over that. But you have Dylan Stoner. You have obviously Taya Martin and Brendan Presley, and obviously those guys developed. We'll keep that. But at the same time, you can make do with skill position. What you need is time.
Yeah.
And for Spencer, there was so little time for him that not only was he not able to drop back, and not only was he able to not drop back and pass, he also couldn't scramble because the pass rush was so lethal because it was coming from all places. There wasn't even place like, okay, the pass rush is coming one place, you can step up in the pocket and run, or you can rip out of the pocket from the right or left. There was nothing. There was not a place for him to go. So forget how great your legs are. There's nothing you could do, and that was a difficult thing with him. And even for Shane Ellingworth, this is a guy, pocket passer. Obviously, he's not a ground zero quarterback, but he's obviously not crazy mobile. He's mobile enough, but he had to fall within the crunches of that. And obviously for him, the other issues are youth and not really learning the playbook because there was barely an offseason. He barely had time to learn the playbook, and you could see it was very vanilla compared to what they usually do. They were taking their shots, but for the most part, the playbook was very simple. A lot of run game, a lot of ball control. But at the same time, without that offensive line, it changes the whole complexion of how you play. And when you have a guy like Shane Ellingworth, we'll stick with that for a second. You want to play ball control, you run the ball, you play defense, right? But they were running the ball even when it's 3rd and long, even when it's 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1, and they know they might not get it because And the reason you're not able to sustain that, you're not able to, rush the ball on a 40-yard run and then suddenly the play action game opens, or suddenly you have better field position and you can make those throws and work as a complement to your run game. But you don't have that run game because of that offensive line.
Right.
And then that all circles back to your quarterback having harder situations because of that offensive line. It just permeated everywhere. And for Spencer, again, yeah, he's a running quarterback, but doesn't mean he doesn't need time to throw.
Yeah.
We saw how many times we said his pocket presence gotten better. Great job by Tim Rattay, the quarterback's coach. He's done an excellent job this season. You can see it with the pocket presence, the mechanics. That's the number one spot you see with Spencer. And obviously there were some turnover issues, of course, right? But you saw just the game-breaking talent. For Spencer, you love what he brings, right? We'll stay there. It affected him for sure, but you love that this is a guy who's, a leader, right? A guy who you could see with how much heart and
intensity,
passion.
Man.
Right,
seriously, intensity.
The heart and passion he plays with all season long. You're right. Intensity is a great word because you saw it whenever he had Zoom calls with him and just the raw emotion in losses or even in wins where he made mistakes and maybe it was just one turnover or two turnovers.
Right.
But having that accountability, he is the leader. But yeah, he's a gamer as well. He wants to play. He wants to compete. He wants to make every single play. But sometimes that's hard as a quarterback. You need to eat some of those. You need to throw the ball some. It's different from being a running back or a wide receiver where you're just going. Quarterback, you're controlling the offense. That's why game managers exist, right? That's why there's a place for quarterbacks who don't turn the ball over. Even though they might not do crazy things, they won't turn the ball over, and they'll keep the offense on schedule. There's a reason that exists, and that was a hard thing for Spencer. But, yeah, the offensive line definitely had an impact on this team.
Permeated throughout, you're right, and definitely directing the attention towards that quarterback position, right? And that's sort of where you see it primarily, and it was very bizarre to see all season long. When you look at next season, do you anticipate a quarterback battle in the offseason?
I think it has to be. It's not like Spencer. Had Spencer not thrown so many turnovers, then I think he would have separated himself. But not only has he done that, which hurts a lot. But also, you saw it in the Texas game. You take away, 4 turnovers, right? Obviously it's not all on Spencer, but a couple of those turnovers, he can't be doing those things because all of a sudden it flips the position and that game is a loss. That game should have been a win by all accounts and all measures. The defense is doing excellent, right? But you give Texas Sam Ehlinger the ball 8 yards away, 15 yards away, and 20 yards away. It makes life really easy for them. And especially in a game where I think besides one drive, they didn't drive it past, like when they were 60 yards or farther away, there was only one drive that they were able to score a touchdown or score any points. Every other drive, they were stalled and punted the ball away, which is amazing, right? At the time, that was the best offense in the Big 12. And even without, obviously that was the time, but they're still a prolific offense. You know that. Everyone knows that. But, yeah, you have those sort of turnovers, it really does hurt. And not only that, you have you're not just looking for another option simply because Spencer Sanders has turnovers. You have, the generation, right? The next guy who's in line, that quarterback. You saw his talent this year, the arm strength, the poise, the maturity, and that's what really separates Shane Illingworth from most freshmen. He's so poised and mature and his understanding, his football IQ is such high levels for a guy who's a freshman, a true freshman also. And he's of the mold that Mike Gundy's used to, right? That pocket passer, and I don't think there's as much factor as people make it out to be, but it's definitely a thing, right? He is that kind of guy, and you saw, the trust, right? How many times have we talked about Mike Gundy does not like playing freshmen, right? At all positions, especially quarterback, and while Spencer Sanders could have played Game 2 and Game 3, he went to Shane Illingworth, a true freshman, and stuck with him for 2 more games. And that's just a trust. They went more ball control, and they kind of babied him. So they really babied him. But the fact that he's out there, he's still out there. He's still your quarterback. He's still the most important player on this Oklahoma State team at that moment. And the fact that you're putting him out there, and now he gets a whole season to develop. He had that entire offseason to learn. The entire season to learn. Now he gets a whole offseason. Now he gets more maturity and experience and just understanding. And most true freshmen who don't play, they don't play a single game. The fact that he got real game experience is going to really be a factor next year.
100%, because it's like you said, it's not just he's going out and playing Kansas. He played Kansas, obviously, but he went out and played West Virginia, a very talented West Virginia team. He went out and obviously Tulsa ended up being a freaking great team, right?
No doubt.
Towards the end there for sure. He went out and had a clutch performance against them from the first pass. My goodness, remember Shane Illingworth to Dylan Stoner set off the seat. Was it Dylan Stoner or Tylen Wallace?
It was Tylen Wallace.
Tylen Wallace, excuse me. I think there was he launched it downfield to Dylan Stoner at one point, though.
Yep.
And it was incomplete.
That's right.
Yeah, I believe it was actually maybe the next or one of the two games after that.
Yep.
But it was so valuable, these minutes, because it wasn't just garbage time. Because that can happen, right?
Yeah.
You can have some weird quarterbacks go in during garbage time. Heck, Drew Brown went in during garbage time sometimes for Corn Dog, I think once.
And he did for Spencer.
Yeah, exactly. So, you have these things here and there that will just develop Shane Illingworth into gaining more confidence. My goodness, Shane Illingworth with more confidence is going to be a great football player. One of the better quarterbacks, I think, in Oklahoma State history, in recent Oklahoma State history at least.
And he has the potential to develop into even more.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, you're right. That's a great point you bring up with the pass. The fact that he comes down and just throws up a 50-50 ball.
Mm-hmm.
He's not just throwing to wide open guys and easy short things. He's throwing all over the field.
Sure.
He's ready to launch the ball down the field. He's confident in his arm, and he's able to throw 50-50 balls. It's not easy to throw 50-50 balls, but he's doing it. He does it with looks like relative ease, but it's not, right?
Yeah.
Those are difficult things because you might have to, you might swallow it and take an interception. That's why they're called 50-50 balls. But at the same time, he did it. He played well, and it's really going to create something interesting next year.
The most surprising unit this year, I think, when it comes to just how it played out, is right there with Shane Illingworth and right there with Spencer Sanders in the backfield, right?
Sure.
When you look at this running back core and how sometimes it might have even looked that Chuba Hubbard was the worst of them. I'm not saying that definitively, and that's not true.
Yeah,
he was the best of them. He's very good. But my goodness, there was games here and there where Desmond Jackson, where Dominic Richardson, where L.D. Brown, oh my goodness, L.D. Brown in the beginning of the year, remember that? They were monstrous, with just the way that they ran, their running style, downhill very much so, speedy. Some of them have an element of power to it. It is a fantastic running back core this year. It was the one that we didn't think was going to be deep, but my goodness, probably ended up being one of the more deep units on this team.
Of all the depth in this team, you're right. I mean, we talk about 2019, and there was always that element of, Chuba, don't go down Chuba, because who's going to come in next, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this team would have been, who would have, I don't even want to speculate 2019, right? I mean, that was tough, right? You could see the depth. I mean, and coming into 2020, yeah, we thought it would be better because we had Dominic Richardson. But again, he's a freshman who we didn't know how much was going to play. Desmond Jackson had been hurt. And yeah, he had a lot of, not hype per se, but he had good things coming about him.
Right.
But at the same time, he was unproven, right? He didn't do anything because he was hurt. And then you had L.D. Brown, who, again, I compared to Leon Washington to begin the year because he was just, he had so much speed. He was a good outside runner, but he really struggled within the tackles.
Yeah.
Now, if you watched in 2020 and closed your eyes in 2019, you wouldn't have believed me.
Yeah.
You would think that L.D. Brown is this big physical runner who's so great within the tackles, and he transformed his body.
Honestly.
He transformed himself on the field where he became this big, strong, really, you see how muscular he was in 2020. And physical, his mentality. He's not just strong, but he's running through tackles. His patience got better. His vision, his cutability, his ability to maneuver through the tackles.
Right.
That's an art, right? And he got a lot better at that. Good at following his blocks and then bursting in the open field like Chuba Hubbard, right? He looked like Chuba Hubbard in the beginning. And I remember at the beginning of the year, there was very, very early, but there was some NFL talk about him, right?
Yeah.
Because he's that kind of back, and he's got that sort of. You always knew he had that game-breaking speed, potentially even faster than Chuba Hubbard. But
even last season,
right? Yeah, and now you add in those other things, and he was a great running back when he played. Then you get Desmond Jackson later on, who was obviously impressed when he came in against Kansas and did some things. But Texas Tech, man, he really took off, right?
Unreal.
This guy is great in the zone running game. He can put in his foot in the ground and just go. He's a downhill runner. He goes north and south. That's what it means. I mean, just keeping yourself on schedule, keep going forward, follow your blocks, run some guys over. Then Dominic Richardson, he's a true power back.
Sure.
6'1", 200 something. He can run through guys. Again, good in the zone running game. Vision, patience. You talk about all these elements, and these running backs really flourished. And that's why I say the skill position is not a problem this year. It wasn't that Chuba Hubbard was hurt, and that's why his offense was really hurt. That's a bad narrative. It's that this offensive line hurt, and these running backs, all of them besides Chuba Hubbard, averaged over 5 yards a carry, and Chuba was there at 4.72. But those three running backs all were above 5 yards carry. That's a really good mark considering the blocking that was in front of them.
Right.
And obviously it's skewed because toward the end of the year, the offensive line got better, and guys like Dominic Richardson, Desmond Jackson were running in front of a better offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I mean, it was great to see that, and it's great for the future.
It's great for the future, and it's also like you said, it's interesting to see the perception of Chuba Hubbard this year.
Yeah.
And how some people, you look at Breece Hall and how he's going to be one of the Heisman finalists in New York. And you might think, oh my goodness, Breece Hall, the best running back in the Big 12. And believe me, I think Breece Hall is a fantastic running back. But there was obviously games like OSU where it was just a couple little plays here and there where he would break through. And good for him for capitalizing on that. Don't get it twisted. But my goodness, you can't look at just the statistical end of it for Chuba Hubbard and think, oh my goodness, what a disappointing season. Sure, you might be able to say that, here and there, but you have to look at it holistically. You have to look at how things ended up, how there were even way smaller holes for him to run through, right? And way quicker collapses on these holes for him to run through.
It was a combination of so many things, starting with the holes that he was running through. Because remember, he played majority of the beginning of the year before the offensive line got better, so he was running behind a bad offensive line. Now you combine that with Shane Ellingworth coming in the game. Teams were stacking the box. Now OSU kept running it because they were playing ball control.
Right.
And they wanted to just punt the ball away, play defense. And they didn't want Shane Ellingworth to turn the ball over, or anyone to turn the ball over. Understandable. When you do that, you're going to run against stacked boxes in bad situations. Your yards per carry is not going to be plenty. And there were so many times where he would get the handoff, and there was already a guy in the backfield, and already a defender in the backfield. He had to navigate that. He gets to the line of scrimmage. There's three guys. There's block shedding happening. There's no space to run. It's as simple as that. And there's nowhere to go. And he's gaining, instead of a negative 2-yard run, it's a 2-yard run, a 1-yard run, a 0-yard run. Now, doesn't look great in the stat sheet like you said, but you've really got to appreciate this sort of season and the yards that were picked up, because had it been some other fool back there, then you would have really seen how bad things could be, right? Instead of a 2-yard run, you see -5. On the regular. And you're right. I mean, and I'll say this too, because in 2020, Breece Hall was the best running back in the Big 12.
For sure.
The best in the country potentially, because a big part of one of the most underrated thing in sports that people don't talk about when they put these rankings together is durability. Your best attribute is your availability, right? And obviously, it's hard when you get hurt, right? But it's one of those things. You can't just give someone the benefit of the doubt. You can say, if he was healthy, he'd probably be the best one. But the same reason we don't say Isaac Likely is one of the best point guards, right?
Yeah.
Until this season, right? Again, different matter. But wrong podcast. But anyway, availability is important. But also, you can't. It's. I mean, I understand, right? You're not going to win the Heisman when you can't give the benefit of the doubt. Like say, if he had better receivers, or if he had better quarterback, or a better offense, or blah blah blah. Production speaks, right? And in the end, production's the end all, right? In terms of these awards. But when you talk about just talent and sheer heart and everything, it's tough for a guy like Chuba. It's tough for anyone to really run there. And props off to Chuba Hubbard for sure.
Yeah. What a season for him. He's going to have quite the NFL career. Can't wait to see where he ends up. Speaking of NFL, I mean, you got a guy like Tylan Wallace who may even be more successful in that regard when it comes to overall success prolonged in the NFL. I know you and I think he's going to be a beast at the second level. What did you see from him this season that really stuck out to you? Was it more of the same? Did you see a progression in Tylan Wallace's game? What did you see?
I mean, you talk about a guy who comes back from an ACL tear. There's questions because of the brother and everything. And he came back monstrous. Yeah. And at times he looked like he took a step forward and got better. To me, it was a different role where he had to take on more difficult catches. And I'll say this. It's very difficult to do what he did. Right. Because what Tylan Wallace did in 2019, because of the offensive flow, because of the run game and the screen pass and everything, right? It was, hey, you could run the ball a few times, Chuba Hubbard. Then suddenly it's 80 yards. Safeties have to play up. Linebackers have to play up. Then when you do, because of that, you bring your safeties up. You have to bring your cornerbacks out, right? You have to put them at 10 yards. You have to play off coverage. So that opens the gate for screen passes. It opens the gate for Tylan Wallace curl routes on the regular. Gets the ball in his hands, and then he's explosive. Crossing routes. Let him run with the ball, right? And then again, when he goes down the field, things are very different, right? He's playing up against a different defense, a type of defense, a set defense than he normally would. And that was a lot easier in 2019. Now, again, he's still making those same 50-50 ball catches. He's tracking balls down the field. He's a legit deep threat. Yeah. But at the same time, in 2020, it was very different because teams were so willing to bracket him, and then they could play a light box and defend the run, or they can play a heavy box and stay one-on-one, because they knew if they put 7-8 guys in the box, they would get to the quarterback in about a second, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how the offensive line was playing. So what does that do? You can't run a lot of those same screen passes. You didn't see a lot of them. You saw some of them, not a lot to Tylan Wallace. You couldn't do as much with those short passing game and then let him run after the catch, let him use his explosive running ability, his yards after catch ability. Instead, a majority of his, not a majority, but a good amount of his throws, definitely more than last year, were down the field, just throw up those 50-50 balls, sideline. Even when he's draped in coverage, throw up the ball. And when the ball was thrown to him, it felt like he was going to get it more times than not, no matter who the corner was. And again, no disrespect to any corner out there, but Tylan Wallace is just that talented. A good offense beats good defense, right? The old mantra.
Yeah.
And with Tylan Wallace, when you throw it up there, no matter who the quarterback was, and again, it's not just no matter who the quarterback was. I say that because both Shane Ellingworth and Spencer Sanders are throwing those balls exactly where they need to be. That's a underrated thing where a lot of people can't see where that ball should be. And those guys will routinely throwing it to exactly where you need it to be. And it's somewhat of a risk because you can be intercepted, it can be deflected away. But it was the trust and the chemistry between quarterback, wide receiver to go throw it up. And the reason I say, wrapping back to my earlier point of it looked like he got better than last year. And again, not saying he didn't, but it's because he had to routinely keep going up and catching those balls. So what I'm saying, if you're OSU and you know the pass rush is coming, and sometimes the opposing team wasn't even rushing, it was just 3-4 man fronts, and they were just getting there in a second because of the offensive line, how porous it was. Then you say, okay, Spencer, Shane Allen with three-step drop, go back, one read, throw to Tylan. One-on-one coverage, just step back, look that way, throw it.
Yeah.
You saw that so many times, and Tylan will also come up with it. And a lot of that was just his talent and his ability to high point balls and get it, which is so impressive for a guy who's not the biggest guy, right? Not the fastest guy. Very fast, but not the fastest. And the fact that he continued to do that, those are difficult throws. If you're in the flow of offense and every so often you go up and catch a 50-50 ball, you do this and that, it's different, right? But when he was constantly asked to do that all the time, I mean, a lot, he was doing it routinely, and it looked so good and looked so crisp. That was the best offense, right? That's why in 2020, without that offensive line and without you really being able to get in the flow of your offense, your best offense was there when Tylan Wallace was there. It was a big difference because you weren't able to manufacture the same looks and the same offense and the same spread and the same go without Tylan Wallace, because you just had to kind of sometimes just drop back, look that one way, and throw it.
Tylan Wallace at 6 foot,
right,
190.
Yeah.
That's like a little bit far off of me. I'm a little bit stronger than Tylan Wallace is. I'm a little bit taller than Tylan Wallace is.
Okay.
You know, I'm a little more good looking than Tylan Wallace is. But my goodness, he makes himself look like he's a 6'5"
Yeah.
and just is bulky as hell, right?
That's
the
thing. Yep.
And when he's able to high point these balls, when he's able to be that deep threat downfield, every time a ball is launched out there, I really genuinely believe that even if it was Ethan Bullock all season long, he would have came away with a lot of these things. Just go to Tylan and get out, or go to Tylan and get out of the way, right? Because he's going to make you get out of the way with the way he's able to high point balls, maneuver through defenses, and be an excellent wide receiver, excellent deep threat too.
That's the amazing thing about all of this. When you look at his NFL prospects and the reason he's the 9th receiver in ESPN, the reason he's a second-round pick at best, it's not because of the talent. It's not because of the ability to do this and that. It's simply they look at him and say, okay, you don't got 4.3 speed. You don't got 6'3", 225 frame. Okay, sure, agreed. That's what you have to knock down a stock.
Right.
But smart teams will look at this guy and see that his ability to go up and catch balls, his ability to track not just high point balls, but when the ball's in the air, his ability to track balls to, no, it's going 5 yards to the left, 2 yards to the left, get himself, use body leverage, get the ball, and then go high point the ball, strong hands, probably the most physical receiver in college football. All these traits combined for a guy who's only 6 foot in a league where guys who are 5'10", 5'9", like Antonio Brown, Tyreek Hill, T.Y. Hilton, are able to play the outside receiver. And Tylan Wallace has done that in college. You look at all those traits and you think, okay, this is a guy who I want on my team because he can do all these things. Then you're golden.
Who's the next Tylan Wallace? I know it's a hard question, and I know there will never really be a player like him maybe again, but there's going to be someone on that talent level just because of how OSU breeds these wide receivers. It might not be next year. It might not be in 2 years. It might not be in 3 years, but it's going to come eventually. Do you think that is there any sort of semblance of a chance that we could see somebody on this OSU team next year have a similar output, similar production to this guy?
Now, you're right. I mean, the first thing to consider is the fact that people will be asking for the next Talon Wallace, right?
True.
I mean, you think about this team and how they breed receivers. It's impressive. Now, you look at, obviously, the guys you already have. Now, let's look at the freshmen, right? You have a couple guys, right? Jaden Bray, you have the Green Twins. You have some of these guys coming in, but we know, again, Mike Gundy and freshmen. Now, I'll say this also. I think production-wise, obviously you have guys with talent, but production-wise, this Z receiver is so important, which I'm really starting to learn in the past 2 years. When Dylan Stoner is out there versus when he's in the slot, we really see it. When Braden Johnson as the X receiver, not used as much as the Z receiver. And it's funny because in most teams, the X receiver is considered that number one guy.
Exactly.
But with Casey Duncan plays, with Mike Gundy, with all these guys, the Z receiver is always that number one guy, right? And you look at this team and you look at some of the guys you already have, right? Brendan Presley, who's mostly been in the slot, he's obviously an explosive playmaker with the ball in his hands. But we see in the slot, the routes that come out of it, it's a lot of out routes, whether it's Dylan Stoner, Landon Wolf, or whoever. It's a lot of out routes, a lot of in routes, a lot of slants and short things, some bubble screens, get the ball in his hands. And yeah, Brendan Presley has a lot of talent, a lot of things where he can pop off more than just, hey, catch the ball, go out of bounds.
Yeah.
But you saw what the difference when Dylan Stoner, when he was in the slot versus when he was out wide, when he's going down the field, high pointing balls and doing that sort of thing. Now, put a guy like Tay Martin out there, and he's got tons of talent, right? I mean, very underrated, and you didn't see a lot of him this year, but you saw him in the bowl game, right?
Yeah.
He thrived on his out routes. He thrived down the field when the one or two times that they really throw to him. Obviously, again, small sample size, but you saw the way he can go in high point balls, the way, again, he can use body leverage, vertical, strength, speed. And you saw it when he caught the ball, yards after catch, his ability to catch it and go. Now, you have a couple of guys. Now, Braden Johnson, that's another case.
Oh, boy.
Right? I mean, you can't teach that sort of speed.
Yeah.
And, again, not size, but he looks like he's bigger than a 6-foot guy, right?
Looks a lot bigger than he is, yeah.
That's why he played the X receiver spot. He just really, I mean, it's hard. If you can't make contested catches, it's really hard to be a down-the-field threat. Now, there's a bunch of guys, and I think you have just that sort of solid talent out there. Maybe a guy like Tay Martin even develops harder. Maybe Brendan Presley learns to play the outside receiver, gets stronger. But either way, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I can't just sit here right now and say committee receiver, but that Z receiver spot has always been important. Casey Dunn was obviously impressed by Tay Martin. And I was too. I mean, it wasn't just, hey, he was open, wide open, throw to him. No, he was making hard catches, right? He was using his route running to get open. And he did a lot of those things. And it's going to be interesting going forward for sure.
Yeah, can't wait to see what happens with that receiver group. And then, looking sort of very close to that receiver group, but maybe not so much in terms of this offense is that Cowboy backs position. Maybe people want them to act more like receivers. I know people are screaming for that. But how would you evaluate one of our favorite positions this year, and specifically, one of our favorite players this year, Logan Carter, the most underrated player on this OSU team?
Oh man, Logan Carter is an excellent blocker. That's his best trait. That's what they use him a lot for. That's why he was on the field a lot. They use a lot of 12 personnel this season, whether it was in the diamond formation, that full house pistol when him and Jelani Woods are back there, whether it was just in the run game where he's an inline tight end, maybe they had one in the backfield, one there. You had Logan Carter there a lot. As a run blocker, he was strong. He's smaller than Jelani Woods, but he was strong. He was getting on his blocks. And then you saw him in the backfield. There's times where they would leave an unblocked pass rusher and Logan Carter would pick him up.
Right.
Which is impressive. He's a tight end, right? You're talking about some really impressive defensive ends in the Big 12, right? You would see a lot of that, but let's take this point off first. The Cowboy back is not underutilized.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, let's say this. I mean, I'll start with the example of Bruce Arians, who is obviously an excellent coach in the NFL, great offensive mind. He, for years, has been criticized for not using tight ends, right? Or not even criticized. People just assumed it was lack of talent. Then you had O.J. Howard there, who's obviously an amazing receiver, and Bruce Arians didn't really use him. Yeah, underutilized there as a receiver. Underutilized as a receiver. That's the key. But at the same time, he uses these guys as blockers. And in the end, you can't argue with the numbers. Yeah, you can say O.J. Howard's a talent, he's not being used. Agreed. But at the same time, every play caller has their style. Mike Gundy's offense is different from Lincoln Riley. Kyle Shanahan is different from Sean McVay. No matter where you go, no matter what level you're playing at, different play callers use different styles. Now, obviously, some guys can adapt, but only to a degree. you have your styles, you have your things, you have your schemes, and to just change it up simply because you get a talent here and there is impossible. You really draw it up the way you want to, and a lot of times you find, and obviously there are some guys who are super adaptable, but it's hard in football. Basketball is one thing. Football is a very difficult thing, right? And it's not that they don't use these tight ends, they don't use these cowboy backs. They use them. They just use them primarily as blockers, and those short out routes, those little stick routes, not that much down the field. Sometimes you see him down the field on those vertical routes, but instead of those seam routes, but not a lot of that. A lot of it is a short game. A lot of it is the blocking game, but at the same time, they were utilized so well in those schemes, and it helped. When you have this struggling offensive line, you have another blocker, another good blocker. When you have that run game, again, struggling offensive line, you get other blockers. And even if they aren't struggling, that's just more blocking, and it works because they can also catch the ball, right? And you saw Logan Carter out there as a slot receiver a bunch. You saw Jelani Woods, not as much, but you saw Logan Carter, who was an impressive guy this year. And like I said, they're not underutilized. They're just utilized in a different role. And also say this, just because a guy is 6'7" and athletic doesn't make him a good football player.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying Jelani Woods isn't good and he's not underutilized as a receiver, but simply because he's that tall doesn't mean he's that good.
Yeah.
That's not factual, right? It's not set in stone like that. And again, because he maybe he goes on to wherever he's going and he ends up going to the NFL and puts up 500 to 8,000 yards a season. Sure, he can, but at the same time, Mike Gundy doesn't use his tight ends in that way. And you saw with Blake Jarwin, I don't think he capped more than 300 yards a season or about that number. And that's just a testament to what this offense is. And in the end, it works. And you can't just sit here and tell me that, hey, if Mike Gundy used tight ends, maybe they would have a better record in Bedlam. No, that's not true. None of it is. But at the same time, different play callers use different things. And that's just the fact, right? Different guys go different ways. The way this offense is used, the way this offense is built is not around the tight ends. And that's fine.
It's like saying, if I teach my cat astrophysics, it could be an astronaut. Sure, maybe, why not? But it's just not something I'm going to do. You know what I mean? And it's how the offense flows around. It's how the offense is built, and it has paid dividends for Mike Gundy, who over the years has built a consistent offense in this Big 12. When we flip over to the other side of the ball, man, I mean, we had probably the best defense that I've seen out of OSU in quite a long time. Jim Knowles, year 3. There's a reason that Jim Knowles is talking to Illinois right now. I mean, he had quite the year scheming wise and elevating this team to being one of the top defenses in the country.
What a season, right? You talk about year 1, and he's getting pressure. I mean, he came in from Duke, known for his pressure, his ability to draw blitzes. And he did that, but they were getting burned on the back end.
Yeah.
And suddenly this was one of the worst defenses. And you might get a few sacks here and there, but it's more about consistent pressure than it is about sacks. Year 2, it got better. And toward the end, you really saw what this defense can be. And you didn't see a lot of sack numbers. But at the same time, they were a better defensive unit. And it's hard to get sacks when you're in the Big 12, when you're going against these prodigious offenses, right? But year 3 is when you really saw it come together. Now, there's 2 aspects of this. One is the talent that he's developed and this team has developed. And 2 is the scheme.
Right.
And, that scheme is so impressive to me because you think about the way this guy draws up blitzes, he game plans. And we saw it game to game. I mean, you see it game 1 against, not Tulsa, but the next game, against West Virginia.
Yes, West Virginia.
And you have a quarterback in Jared Dagey who is not a great down-the-field passer. But he's very good in the short to intermediate route. So what do? You draw up so many cover zeros, stack the box, try to stop this running back, Letty Brown, a talented running back. You try to stop the short passing game, and you get the ball out of his hands quickly. And it worked, right?
Yeah.
Whenever Jared Dagey did try to go down the field, guys were open sometimes, but he'd miss them. All those big plays were really short crossing routes or short slant routes where guys would take it, right? I forget who it was, Winston Wright, I believe, who got that and went for a 75-yard touchdown. Sure. That was a short slant route. Who caught it and ran, right? That's where the big plays were given up, and that happens, right? When you're blitzing that much, it's going to happen a little bit. But whenever they throw it down the field against these 2 cornerbacks, it was either stopped because those guys were such good in coverage, because you could trust Darius Williams and Jarek Bernard Converse in coverage, or you would get to the quarterback, or he would throw it to a guy who's wide open and miss it.
Yeah.
And that's the game planning. That's the understanding your enemy, right? And then so that's my point. His schemes and concepts are great. You talk about the Trace Ford, Tyler Lacey Calvin Bundish package. That's my favorite, obviously. I made up a name. It's called the NASCAR package. I should really coin that.
Trademark.
But those three, you put those three-man front. I remember only three-man front, so it's not supposed to be heavy pressure.
Yep.
And then you throw 8 in coverage. But because those guys, I mean, think about those names. Tyler Lacey, Trace Ford, Calvin Bundish.
Yep.
Those are 3 excellent pass rushers. And suddenly you're able to put Tyler Lacey in the middle. You got 3-man front, and you're getting to the quarterback with that. That, again, schemes, concepts. Then number 2, you talk about the talent this defense has, how they've really grown, the versatility they have. That's my number one thing about this team, the versatility. Because you have guys, you have safeties that can stop the run, that you can stack into the box. You have linebackers that you can put in coverage. You have cornerbacks that can stick one-on-one, so you can bring those safeties and linebackers in to stack the box and rush the blitzer. You don't have to change your packages. You don't have to change your packages. You don't have to go from a 4-2-5 to a 6-4 or something or another where you're bringing heavy packages, or you don't have to go to a dime package, because you can trust those guys in coverage. Right, Malcolm Rodriguez, a converted safety. You have Colby Arvapila, Trey Sterling, who can stack in the box. Tanner McAllister was an excellent tackler. You have different things, right? And that was just the beauty of how this defense flowed. And man, you talk about the talent, the depth, the versatility. There's so much with this team.
The NASCAR package, which is, by the way, one of the greatest names that this guy's ever coined, was absolutely like one of the most athletic and quick and vicious, I guess, attacks probably that we've seen across the Big 12 for sure. College football, maybe. You have all those 3 athletic guys down there on the defensive line and standing up, right? And making sure they get a quick jump off the ball, and they're able to apply so much pressure and be so smart in their play styles that it worked so tremendously well for Jim Knowles and company this year. And that, along with everything else, right? The adaptability of this defense, the creativity of this defense is why, like we said before, he's getting calls from Illinois and other schools. I'm sure will follow suit. Let's hone in on the secondary a little bit more too, because this unit this year, I mean, for Darius Williams, the question marks at the beginning of the season, but from some, questioning whether he can be that guy to fill the big shoes that I guess AJ Green left. But my goodness, if those were big shoes, then these are Kevin Durant size shoes. I don't know if you've ever seen the picture of him, and they look like hockey sticks, his legs. Wow. I mean, this guy really stepped up this season and was one of the best corners in college football.
No doubt. I mean, you just talk about a guy who not only is sticking so well, but a guy who's an excellent tackler. This is one of the most underrated aspects of being a run stopper, because there's times where, it's 3rd and long, your defensive coordinator, your coach says, hey, play off. And it's not, they don't even say that. Here's what it is. Maybe it's 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15. And you know that, okay, you can give up a catch within 10, 15 yards, but you have to go make a tackle. Or there's times where these Big 12 schemes are so good that they'll move a guy in motion. They'll get him the ball in space, and they say, hey, can your guy tackle my guy?
Yeah.
Right? And you talk about a guy like Keelan Stokes or another explosive playmaker, right? Marvin Mims, excuse me. Right?
Every time. I do it too.
And you get Marvin Mims one-on-one with Rodarius Williams or with any corner. You say, hey, I think my guy is better than yours. If you're Lincoln Riley, you're thinking, my guy's better than yours.
Yeah.
But Rodarius Williams is saying, no, I'm better than yours. And he makes that tackle. That's one of the most underrated aspects of his game. But it's also that he's not only playing great coverage with cover 2 or cover 3, with having safety help and linebacker help, or having, just safety help over the top. It's that in so many times, Jim Knowles can expect his corners, Jarek Bernard-Converse and Rodarius Williams, to stick in coverage one-on-one while playing cover 0 with no help on the side or over top, and man-to-man coverage. And this guy does it. He sticks like glue, does not give an inch. That's what makes this guy special.
Jarek Bernard-Converse too. I mean, him being able to fill in that second role, right? Because one of the biggest questions, in addition to Rodarius Williams being the number 1 guy, was who the heck's going to be the number 2 guy now?
Right. That was the big thing.
That was huge. And Jarek Bernard-Converse, maybe it was the last name, maybe he was adding that, but man, he really stepped into this role and is going to be the top cornerback next year.
When he came down, you said, okay, he was a slot corner. He played the third safety role.
Yeah.
But he played slot corner most of the time. Played cornerback in high school. You said, okay, that makes sense. But it was still iffy, right? Then Christian Holmes comes in, transfers, and you think, okay, Jarek Bernard-Converse will rotate back up top. Tanner McAllister can be cornerback depth, whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, this guy blossoms into, a stud corner. He is so heavily overshadowed by Rodarius Williams.
I know, right?
But he is sticking in glue. Find me a few plays where neither of those guys are hurt, and you actually see a pass completed past like 10 yards, right? They just don't exist. They really don't. Except the OU game. Again, they were hurt. That was one of the things, right? And that was the thing. Besides when they were hurt, they were not giving up an inch. Darius Williams was a shutdown corner. Jarek Bernard-Converse was a shutdown corner. Both those guys were shutdown corners in 2020. That's how good they were. And you're right. I mean, you think, okay, number one corner is the most important thing. In today's not only football league, in any football league, but also in the Big 12 where you have crazy offenses, crazy quarterbacks, crazy schemes, and crazy wide receivers. You not only have one good wide receiver, you have 2, 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing. So having that second guy is so important. And that's why it's like, you think about a team like OU, right? You take out Marvin Mims on the outside, you still have like 5 more receivers to take care of. West Virginia had like 4 of them, right? Every team has several receivers that can still beat you if you're not competent out there at corner. And the way Jarek Bernard-Converse was able to, shut down guys the way Rodarius was, it just created such continuity. It gave, again, adding to the whole theme of versatility, it gave Jim Knowles more to work with and ways that he could trust his guys outside and blitz guys or bring pressure or stack boxes or disguise coverages, do whatever he wanted to do.
When you have more people you can rely on, you can have more creativity with it, and that's what Jim Knowles is able to do this year, and that's why his defense led the league, or led the country. Okay, third down in defense, obviously. Superb statistics, and you know how this was and how this came into fruition. It was because of the pressure they were applying before they got to third down.
This is what they do. They get you in third and long. You might get 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 yards down the field, but then they get you. They'll stop you eventually, right? You might get like 4 first downs, but in the 5th one, they say, okay, now you're in 3rd and 10. What are you gonna do? And Jim Knowles, he has that NASCAR package again that I made up. Then he can, at times he'll say, okay, I'm gonna rush 7 and see if you can stop me. If you can, get your guys, if you can get that ball out quickly enough. And here's the thing: just because he's rushing 7 guys doesn't mean that wide receivers are wide open. Doesn't mean that anyone's wide open, because you have these guys. You can bring Trey Sterling in coverage. You can bring Thomas Harper, Malcolm Rodriguez. Amen. You have so many different guys. Tanner McAllister, different. And obviously those guys are not as superior as the 2 guys on the outside, but they can still cover. Let's not forget that. Colby Arvo-Peel. So you do all these things, and you have so much creativity on third down. The schemes, you can bring the pressure. How many times did we see a free runner this season?
So many times.
You think about Malcolm Rodriguez in that first game, going out for that sack. I mean, there's so many opportunities, and that's what it was. The scheming was so good on third down. That's what really made this defense special. But a theme with third down defense, and a theme with this entire defense overall, is their speed. That's really what separated this team. From top to bottom, from left to right, every position, they had so much sideline to sideline speed. How rangy this whole defense was, really. Where they would try, a lot of times they'll get the ball on the outside. And again, hey, is your guy better than my guy? I think my guy's better than your guy, right?
Yeah.
That's what you do. You can see if they tackle in space. And sometimes it's not a screen pass. Sometimes it's just a pass out there, right? A little out route or a little wheel route by a running back or something. And see, hey, can you stick? And teams will try to do that, or run it outside and see if you can tackle. And this OSU team, not only were they talented and great tacklers and just excellent talents, they were so athletic that they could get to the sideline before you did. Trace Ford, I mean, this guy is 6'4", 250, 240, and he's so athletic. He's like a safety, right? You remember that play against Kansas State? You saw him running down the sideline.
Yeah.
He's so athletic.
Oh, man, I forgot about that. That was crazy.
Right, and you talk about every position where these guys can just run and get down there and make tackles. There's times where I see big Cameron Murray, running all the way to the sideline. He's not getting anyone, but he's running there. Effort, hustle, and athleticism. That's the other thing. The effort level was always there with this defense, with this whole team, honestly. But it was just that sort of thing. But third down defense was really the trademark of this team, on defense at least. And what Jim Knowles really, really did an excellent job with.
That's what the advantage you can have when you have the depth that this team had, right, on that defensive front.
Yeah.
Heck, even in the secondary, you had quite a good bit of depth.
Yeah.
There, obviously very prevalent in the defensive front. But my goodness, yeah, what a year, what a time to be, if you are an OSU fan, what a time to be an OSU fan, because you got to see all this great depth come together.
Yeah. No doubt. And one more point before we get on the depth is the other thing that really let this defense flourish was the head coach. This is really credit to a coach who's so used to offenses, who's so used to seeing, okay, this is a game that whoever gets the ball last, right? How many times have we seen that, heard that in the Big 12, right? In a game where you'd expect points to be scored, and you just need your defense, either defense, just get one turnover, and basically you win the game because of that, right? It's one of those sort of things. But time after time, game after game, this head coach, Mike Gundy, was so ready to play ball control, call it conservative you want, but instead of running on 3rd and down, or instead of passing on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10, risking a turnover, he would run the ball, kick the punt away, make that offense go 60, 70, 80, 90 yards. And again, paired in with a great punter who had a great year, Tom Hutton. And you would force that team to go 60, 70, 80, 90 yards. And they wouldn't be able to because of how good this defense was. But there's a big difference between, hey, go 80 yards and score, and go 30 yards and score, go 40 yards and score. A big difference. It's not just the yardage, it's the mentality, the understanding, the way your defense, the way your offense has to perform, and just the mental strain.
Yeah. There
is a huge difference, right? That's why sustaining drives is so difficult in football. And for Mike Gundy to do that and trust his defense, trust Jim Knowles in that defensive scheme. We know this. Mike Gundy's not a huge defensive guy. He's admitted it.
Yeah.
He's more involved with the offense. But for him, this is the main thing about head coaches. Understanding this is what makes the best head coaches. When you can understand your team, understand their strengths and weaknesses, play the game plan around that, work around that. Like Kyle Shanahan, great example. With the 49ers, he's obviously known as an offensive guy for his offensive scheme. With Atlanta, Matt Ryan won MVP, right? You had that great offensive that great season from him, right? But when he came to San Francisco, he really came together with this great defense, one of the best in the NFL. But Kyle Shanahan's strength and understanding as a head coach versus an offensive coordinator, understanding that, okay, we have to punt the ball away. We have to play a more ball control approach because we're not going to put up the same fireworks.
Yeah.
It's not the ego of, hey, I'm an offensive guy. I want to score points. It's the understanding. That's how you make good head coaches. And it was really Mike Gundy allowing Jim Knowles to do his work. That really is something that has not been stated this season enough.
Yeah, and here's the thing, too, is that Mike Gundy, I mean, what a year he's had as well. I mean, you think about from the beginning, right, or the beginning of the summer with his response to COVID, when you think his response to, my goodness, OAN and all the stuff and all the drama that happened there, Mike Gundy had a great season, I think. Like, when all things considered, right, when you consider the context of it, when you consider the offensive line play, when you consider the dramatics off the field, and then when you consider when you consider the fact that he's letting his coordinators do their jobs, tremendously when there's great micromanagement. No, I don't mean that. When there's great management on a micro level, meaning these coordinators are able to do their thing, on a macro scale, it makes it even better. It makes things run smoothly. And Jim Knowles, my goodness, you saw that this year. One of the things that was, I guess, super lacking was that defense, right? The element of defense, and Jim Knowles was able to add it this season. And man, what a season it was for the defense.
Yeah, and you can go back to the depth that you asked about earlier. This was, obviously you saw the depth in full effect. Because here's the problem with OSU in most years. Forget depth, they don't even have the starters.
Yeah.
But here you had the starters at every position. Then you're going 2-3 deep, and you were going at least 2 deep in every position. With the defensive line, I mean, you could be going 2, 3, 4 deep, right?
Yeah.
You think about losing Colin Clay and Jaden Jernigan, and yet you're bringing guys like Sione Asi and Fofana and Tyron Irby at one point, and then Cody Waltershed blows up. You're good 2 deep easily there. Devin Harper, Calvin Bundage. I mean, those are 2 starting linebackers in almost every team.
Yeah.
You think about the safeties too, right? Thomas Harper had a great breakout season. Tanner McAllister came out of nowhere. Not out of nowhere, but he broke out for sure. And then the cornerbacks were tough, of course, but Christian Holmes was a great rotational piece where he comes in and there's very, very little drop-off, if none at all. And at every position you had so much depth, which was so key at times because a lot of times what I noticed, especially early on, when they were playing ball control and kicking the ball away, you're not scoring like 5, 6, 7, 8 drives straight.
Right.
That wears on a defense because a big aspect of football, and a lot of times you see this where the offense scores or just the offense is moving, and it kind of energizes the defense, right? I guess what I'm talking is the other way around. Say the offense is so bad, and you have what's supposed to be a really good defense, but they're struggling because every time the ball goes out, they know they have to defend. They get a stop. They know it's going to the offense. Nothing's going to happen. 3 and out, and they're back on the field.
Yeah.
That's demoralizing. And think about it. With this depth, I mean, forget the depth. You just have 11 starters out there who are demoralized every time, or theoretically should be demoralized. But now you have like 20 guys, 22 guys. We talk about all the two deep guys who are supposed to be coming out and doing their job every single play. And they could easily be demoralized knowing that, hey, Ethan Bullock is not getting yards. Yeah, obviously Shane Ellingworth played well, but at times the offense was stalling. They were not putting up the points they usually do. And this defense could have been demoralized. Each person could have been demoralized, but they weren't, right? They continued to go out and fight. And there's one aspect of that. And second aspect is you get tired, right? How many times have we talked about conditioning and how much the conditioning hurts so many teams? It didn't really hurt OSU. The first game, second game a little bit, they talked about it, especially with the offensive line and some of the guys on offense. But for the most part, the reason you didn't see this defense really get so worn out was because they were deep, right? You can take out Brendan Evers, put Israel Antoine in. You could take out these safeties and bring in Thomas Harper. And you bring Devin Harper in. You can bring in depth and still stay at the same level. And you wouldn't get tired at all. I mean, think about an offseason where you didn't have the same conditioning. You didn't get Rob Glass's program. And you had COVID. So you really had no conditioning. And you weren't even doing so for the most part. You weren't doing a lot by yourself, right? I mean, obviously, some guys were, but for the most part, that was the key. And you didn't know what was going to happen. You didn't even know if you were going to play. And all of a sudden, you get thrown into it. The depth was so key for that aspect. But also just in general, even if there is a normal year, depth is so key for defense, especially. Because guys can get tired, but you keep rotating guys in and out and still have the same, value. It hurts an offense
in this league, especially. When you have these high-powered offenses that can just drain teams, right? You look at just some of these games that's happened all season long. Obviously, OU's sort of a good example of it because when you see how much they were able to explode as an offense, it tires a team out even with some great depth. But all season long that depth was able to stay consistent, right? Despite having to be that number one guy, the guy that had to. Or the unit rather that had to step up and win some of these games, right? And Mike Gundy recognized that, and he was able to have a great ball control mentality. It really worked for this team.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I didn't see once that this depth in this team. Sorry, I didn't see once where this team got tired.
Yeah,
like even when they were coming out 5, 6, 7 drives straight, constantly coming out off of 3 and outs or short-lived drives, and they had to come out and defend and know that even when the ball goes back to the offense still might not score. I didn't see once that this team was tired, even because a lot of times you see that where you see running backs. This is a good example of running backs. Why do you have bell cows? Because they're running 20. By the time they get to 15, 20, 25, 30 carries, they get stronger and stronger. They wear a defense out. By the fourth quarter, how many times you heard the cliche, right? By the fourth quarter, the defense is worn out.
Yeah.
In this season, you never saw that. Even though I think it was more of them being just outmatched. But in general, you never saw it. These big plays and stuff didn't happen because the defense was outmatched or the defense was tired or something. It was because the defense was, bad gap discipline or little things here and there. But that just goes back to the depth, and it's great to not to be able to just count on that. And when starters go out like a Trace Ford, I think you can bring in a guy like Brock Martin, such a talent like that is just such a luxury.
Yeah, incredible production from him and many other players on this OSU defense, and just this team as a whole. I mean, it was a year of ups and downs. It was a year of weirdness. It was a year that people will never forget, but my goodness, it happened, and it sort of happened exactly kind of very deep down how a lot of people maybe had thought that it would have gone, especially in the weirdest year that probably in recent history that many people have experienced. Why not have a weird year for OSU football as well? One of the weirdest. I know we're going to use that word many times, but teams, I feel like in this college football landscape, because it there's so many different storylines that happen with this team, and they will continue to move forward as the offseason goes along, as the season finishes here, finished down there in Orlando, Florida, and we will have all of that covered for you here on the Ocali at Ocali.com, at Ocali on Twitter, at Ocali Sports on Twitter. Thank you once again for tuning into all of our coverage this past year. We appreciate it. We could not have done any of this without you guys tuning in. For Ryan Novozinsky and Sudeep Tumma, one last time for football season. Have a great day.